This video is brought to you by Incogni. Hello Internet, Seth Skorokowski, and today we're going to talk about running a city campaign for your tabletop RPG. I've run several urban campaigns over the decades. The first, really the only D&D setting that I ever fell in love with was the old Lankmar City of Adventure, and I own just about everything Lankmar from 1st and 2nd edition AD&D. Later I got into Cyberpunk 2020, and we spent many an hour on the mean streets of Night City, and I've talked in other videos about our Juvie Street Gang campaign that took place entirely in a single small neighborhood. Cities are great for political or social intrigue games, spy thrillers, urban horror, criminal gangs, heists, law enforcement, or investigative adventures. So that's what we're going to talk about, how to set up and run a city campaign. Now this video is going to be system neutral, so it doesn't matter if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, Cyberpunk, Blade Runner, Call of Cthulhu, or whatever else, the same general concepts apply. So while the details for fantasy, modern day, or sci-fi might be different, city settings and how to organize them is still pretty universal. So the first thing that we need when running a city campaign is a city, and for that we need a map. Now maybe you're using a pre-written city setting or a real modern day city map just straight off of Google Maps, or using a map generator or drawing a map yourself. That just simply determines how much of this you need to establish on your own when you're making your city. So when designing a city map, the first thing that I like to start off with is establishing the key locations, such as your government buildings, interesting features and landmarks such as memorials, fountains, and statues, parks. A lot of people seem to forget parks, plazas, cathedrals, or major temples, arenas and stadiums, any ports, whether that be seaports, airports, or starports, or any of the other major locations that stand out or would be easily known by everyone in the city, and many of the major thoroughfares are going to be leading to on the map. Now, the map key is what we like to call your gazetteer or directory, listing building 1 as the castle, building 2 is the great temple, etc., etc. The player version lists all the key notable locations that your average citizen would know, so give this to your players as their initial key. Now, the Game Master version of this is going to hold all the less obvious and lesser known details, such as the inns, notable homes, fences and stolen goods, hospitals and healers, notable businesses, gang hideouts, or other details that the player characters might not initially know but should hopefully be discovering over the course of these adventures. Now, I do say might because depending on your campaign, you might have the characters start off, each knowing a few of the more non-obvious locations. Maybe they all know about these, or each of them has a certain number that they know and they can share those with each other, however you want to do it. Now, consider things that a city might have. Large cities might have multiple police precincts. If so, where are they located? Is there a special transportation here, whether that be rickshaws, gondolas, subways, or robocabs? Is there a large river or harbor? And if there are there ferry boats or water taxis? There's different ways that people could cross this body of water. Is there a subway? If so, where are the stations? Is it entirely underground, or are there elevated trains as well? With fantasy cities, I like marking where all the public wells are located, as these become natural gathering spots for people. Now, a couple things to avoid, or at least consider avoiding when designing your city. But first, a word from our sponsor, Incogni. Right now, data brokers are collecting your information, gathering your name, address, date of birth, buying habits, social security number, political affiliations, family members, everything they can, and selling it to anyone. Prospective employers, landlords, identity thieves, scammers, burglar, it's anyone really. Now, one of the biggest threats are people search sites, which can easily be accessed by harassers who might not like how you drove that one day, or might not like something that you said online and just decide to come after you. Being an online personality myself, this is a legitimate fear of mine. While data brokers are required to remove your information from their database if you request them to, the problem is that there are hundreds of these broker companies out there, making it impossible for anyone to contact and follow up with all of them. And that's where Incogni comes in. You simply make an account, give them permission to act on your behalf, then sit back as they go after brokers with your information and make them remove it. And then follow up with them to make sure that it stays off of their sites. So to help keep your data away from scammers, identity thieves, and stalkers, while also cutting down on all your spam and junk mail and robocalls, hit the link below and use this code SETHSCORE to get 60% off an annual plan with Incogni, and let them do that work for you. And now back to the video of what not to do when making your map. First, don't assign every single building. I've seen this before with some published city settings where every single building on the map is identified as far as what's inside of it. The two big reasons to avoid this are: one, it becomes so much information that it becomes impossible to find anything when you're trying to find something on the map or going through your directory. And two, you want to keep some unidentified buildings so you can use them later on. For adventures into your campaign, you decide that you want to have a theater somewhere and you hadn't put a theater on the map, you can snag one of those unassigned buildings and now it's a theater. The same thing with street names. It's fine to name your major thoroughfares of the city, but if every single street and alleyway has its name written down it, that can become information overload and start cluttering things up. Players very rarely say street names when they're traveling the city. They don't say, "I'm going to walk down Market Street for 3 blocks, then take a left onto Royal, and then take a right into Thurgan Alley." They usually just point at the map and trace their finger along the path as how they're going to get somewhere, or they just simply point to their destination and say that's where they want to go. Next, the city is made up of people, so we need to populate it with some NPCs. Individual NPCs can be broken into 3 main categories. First is your major NPCs. Not necessarily major to the campaign's story, but major to the city. These are known to many people around town and some people far outside of town. Your king, your mayor, your mafia don, rich CEOs or nobles, celebrities such as a famous actor, a local hero, high-level wizard, the Pope. The player characters won't likely know these NPCs personally, at least, not at first, but will know of them. You might, see them from afar around town, but they're difficult to randomly meet on the street. These are the people that you read about in the paper or you see on TV. Then you have your main NPCs. These are your personalities that your players are going to be doing the most face-to-face time interacting with. The bartender at their favorite local hangout spot, maybe their landlord or a local fence, a backroom doctor, skilled craftsman, specialty merchant, or local law enforcement like your friendly neighborhood beat cop. Now, one person that I have used in several cyberpunk campaigns is a pawn shop owner named Skinner, and he's someone that the player characters seek out, to fence stolen goods to or buy things from them. And occasionally Skinner, might hire them for a job for something. Main NPCs have a reputation that the player characters may have heard of before that they meet them, and they're usually pretty easy to find and approach around the city. Unlike your major NPCs, they're a lot harder to actually get some face-to-face time with because they're very important people. Finally, your minor NPCs. These are your characters that you're going to see around, maybe have a quick interaction with: a local beggar, a street performer, a newsie, that crazed street preacher, prostitute, hot dog vendor. These are your NPCs that usually don't have a name that the characters know, but a nickname that the characters refer to them as, such as, ugly naked guy across the street in that apartment. In our kids' game, we had one guy who was known as the Ice Cream Man, who walked around the neighborhood selling homemade popsicles and weed out of a rolling cooler. Now, minor NPCs are very simple, and they're very only a short step away from the faceless masses of the city, kind of more of local color than anything else. And as the campaign progresses, many minor NPCs can evolve into main NPCs, because the player characters, they interact with them and they become fond of them, such as, Ice Cream Man in that campaign. He ended up becoming a main NPC for the campaign for a while because the player characters ended up doing a job where they hunted him down this rival gang of kids who had beat up and robbed him. Now, to keep from having your NPCs just be a list of names with all your major and main and minor NPCs, note some information about them, where they live, what do they do, what are their desires, and any secrets that they want to keep. Secrets and desires give us stuff to work with. Secrets should be discoverable with a little bit of work on the player's part. It could be a source of gossip that the player characters hear around town and they might want to confirm that, or it could be a source of gossip that the person it's about wants to go ahead and squash that down and stop that gossip. Knowing what an NPC desires, be it money, power, revenge, love, whatever it is, helps the game master know how to play this NPC, how they're going to respond to certain things. And player characters who assist an NPC in getting what that NPC desires, that might help the player characters get what they want and what they desire as payment. This can even be discovering what another NPC's secret, for maybe keeping their own secret safe from discovery. Finally is your factions. These aren't NPCs as individuals, but more of a group entity. This is your police department, various criminal gangs, religious orders, different guilds, unions, and secret societies. Factions have a theme, something that unifies this group behind a common cause. And while their leader or certain members of this faction might be individual NPC personalities, the faction itself is its own entity, and it's mostly composed of nameless NPCs. NPCs. The player characters might join or befriend certain factions and cross paths with another one in a bad way, and factions can make very difficult enemies. They're not immortal, but killing a mafia boss doesn't necessarily kill the mafia. The faction just simply reorganizes itself and continues on. So these are a lot harder to get rid of than you would have with just an individual person. With factions, determine what their unifying cause is. Who is their leader? If they have a territory, where is it? Do they have a meeting place? If they do, where is that? Is there a color or a symbol they use, like a guild badge or a graffiti tag? And if so, what does that symbol look like? Players are going to naturally gravitate to certain NPCs and factions more than others. And some of those are easy to predict which ones that they're going to gravitate to, while others are just, I don't know. Sometimes they just fall in love with some weird random NPC that you pulled out of your butt, and scientists are still baffled as to why that is. So certain factions and NPCs are going to rise in importance and get fleshed out a little bit more as the campaign is going on, while other NPCs and factions are just going to kind of fade off into the background and forgotten because the players didn't gravitate to them. And like with locations, if the player characters are already familiar with this city from the very start of the campaign, as that maybe they grew up here, they've been living here for some time, they should also know a few of the local NPCs, allies and enemies and contacts from the very beginning, including some of the factions. So once you have your map and some population, or at least while you're making your map and your NPCs, go ahead and divide the city into districts or neighborhood zones. And I think most people are familiar with some of New York City's districts, Harlem, Hell's Kitchen, Soho, Wall Street. Even if they've never visited New York City, they're at least familiar with those districts. Districts can be a big factor that transforms an urban setting from just a place that's got a bunch of stuff in it into a living and breathing city. This is one of those areas that many pre-written RPG settings will offer to people, but they fail to explain how to really use them effectively. With real major cities, they might have dozens of neighborhoods. Manhattan has around 50 of them. London has 48 spread out across 32 boroughs. But Game Masters, you might want to limit yourself here to 8 to 12 districts. The old AD&D Lankmar map, for example, had 11 districts, including the Royal Grounds. Some neighborhoods might be defined geographically because they're around a certain feature in the city. Southgate because it's around the city's southern gate, or the docks because it's near the docks. And if the docks are really huge, you can maybe split that into two neighborhoods, North Docks and South Docks. A university district might be around some major college, or you might have some neighborhoods that are defined by the demographic of the people that live there, such as, if the really rich district and your really poor districts. Certain trades could also be involved, such as Artist Alley or the Gold District, where all the jewelers are located, or the Pleasure District, where your gambling houses and brothels are all located. Or they could just have ethnic neighborhoods, such as, Chinatown or Little Italy. Each district should have a unique flavor to it, not just the businesses that are there, but also the NPC personalities, some good, some bad. Maybe certain events are unique or more frequent to each district. The University District is known to have frequent student protests, or the docks are known to get extremely busy in the morning and evening tides. And unless every movie I've ever seen has somehow lied to me, Chinatown is all non-stop parades 24/7. This one particular district is a farmer's market every Tuesday, and in another district you're more likely to get robbed or panhandled or pickpocketed, while the rich district you're more likely to get harassed by the cops if you don't look like you belong here. Whichever district that the player characters live in might influence how they're perceived by other people around the city, part of their social status, and influence which local NPCs that they're most familiar with because they share the same neighborhood. Maybe give a brief 1 to 3 sentence history or summary for each district and what it's known for and what sets it apart from the rest of the city. Okay, so now that we have our city, let's get to the fun stuff, running the city. Well, the story and the adventure that the player characters are having should be the spotlight of whatever your games are about. The city should always feel involved in somehow, and the easiest way to do that is with events. Now, I don't mean story and plot events for whatever the adventure is that's going on. I'm talking about events from the city itself that might serve as backdrops or assets or obstacles for whatever the adventure plot just happens to be. Essentially, it's not the characters interacting with the city, but the city interacting with the characters, which I don't know if that makes sense, but let me explain. The first is scheduled events. These are things that can be predicted. When they occur is all known in advance. Things like holidays or festivals like Mardi Gras in New Orleans, or the streets are packed with tourists and people celebrating, or major sporting events, or simply New Year's celebration. We all know when those are going to happen well in advance. Now, maybe those events can help spur the plot, like the player characters attend a masked ball for this holiday, and during that ball, the adventure hook drops, and now they're having having an adventure at a masked ball. Or maybe they're simply in the background, like the player characters are being chased, but the streets have been cordoned off by a parade, and maybe they just simply need to get some supplies for whatever heist it is, but the local merchant or craftsman that they need is closed in observance of the holidays. Now the players have to find another way of getting that item or just make do without it. Those are all your big scheduled events, and they are not going to be everyday occurrences. But also we have minor scheduled events, such as every Wednesday at noon, a huge crowd gathers in the square for the hangings. Or every weekday at 5 o'clock, traffic clogs the city and the characters are going to need to work around that. Or one-time scheduled events, such as a high-profile wedding, or a coronation, or a visiting celebrity like the president is town and everything has gone haywire because the president's in town and everybody wants to go see that. Scheduled events are things that the players should be warned about in advance. It must be established beforehand. Open the session saying how everyone is gearing up for the big festival that's in 2 days, or have an NPC just casually ask them if they plan on attending that big event and what they plan on wearing to that big event. Now, if during the session the players, they might momentarily forget about this event or find that parade or that 5 o'clock traffic blocking their path, but it shouldn't ever be a complete surprise to them. They should at least look at it and go, oh yeah, we knew that was going on. But once they do know about them, the players can also start using those and twisting those events to their advantage in order to work out whatever their plan is going to be. Stealing the idol from the vault is going to be tough, guys. If we trip that alarm or get spotted, the cops will be there in minutes. Not if we wait 3 days to do it. Why that? 4th of July, dude. All the businesses will be closed and all the cops are going to be off at that big stadium concert fireworks show or patrolling the bar district, so we're going to have the place to ourselves. Oh, damn, I forgot about that. Aw, my character just bought tickets to that stadium concert. Well, you're going to have to miss it this year, dude, because you're going to be busy doing crime. The big thing is to show and remind everyone at the table that the city is active and there are things always happening in the city, and its schedule is going to be far more complex than you would have of just simply being day and night. The city has always got something going on. Next are your unscheduled events, more widely known as random encounters. Anytime that the player characters wander the streets, they might experience an encounter. Maybe that's meeting one of the local NPC residents, maybe someone new, or maybe that guy that has a grudge on them from before that they were trying to avoid because they owe him money. Or maybe they see a street performer or encounter a faction. Maybe they get mugged or witness a crime or risk getting caught in a random traffic jam due to an accident, or encounter a riot or a funeral procession. Game masters can choose when and what happens, or they can just simply roll this like a regular random encounter for whatever game it is. Such as, let's say you roll a d6, and on a 1 it means that you have an encounter. Then you roll or choose the most interesting or appropriate encounter for the players to have. But employing district events into your city adds a whole new and cool layer to this. I already talked about how each zone or district should have events that are unique or more common to that neighborhood than any of the others. Well, this is how we employ them. Taking this map from the old Cyberpunk Night City book, our characters start in East Marina District, and they say they want to go to East Park in Japantown. So you ask them how they want to get there. Now they know that traffic around the medical center is always bad this time of day because that's been established, and they want to avoid that. And New Harbor has some big sporting event going on at the stadium, so they decide that they want to avoid that because they're in a rush and they don't want to be delayed. So they say that they're going to go this way. Now they're crossing 5 districts total. So if you roll a random event for this outing, we can then determine which district that event occurs in and roll or choose a random encounter from a list that's tailored for that specific district that encounter occurs in. Alternatively, instead of rolling once for a random event then figuring out which district it's in, we can instead roll an encounter check for each district they go through. So if we say we have a random event that's on a 1 on a d6 roll, we're going to be rolling 5 times, and we're probably going to have 1 or 2 random events because we're going through 5 districts, meaning that longer trips that cross more districts have a higher chance of having an event or having multiple events during them. I like the idea of this, but that does risk, kind of a lot of die rolling depending on how far they're going to be traveling across town, and that could also lead to an abundance of events. So use your best judgment when you employ this and how you want to employ this for individual random events as they're going through the different neighborhoods. Now, most of these events shouldn't require player interaction as much as they're witnessing part of the scenery of the city, life in the big city here. easier. If it's a major NPC encounter, like some mafia don or that big movie star, it might simply mean that the player characters see that person driving past in the back of a limousine or something and not actually face-to-face encounter and talk to them. Or it might mean that the characters encounter some delay, like sudden traffic, and then some skill roll can be used to find a path around a blocked street or push their way through a protest without losing any time. Okay, so heading across town, you can see the lights of McCartney Stadium and all the police directing traffic around it, so it's a good thing you guys decided to bypass that mess. But as you're making your way through Old Town, you see smoke billowing out of one of the buildings, and there's fire trucks and ambulances all around. So give me a drive check to either thread your way through this or an awareness check in order to find a quick way around it. Otherwise, this is going to cost you half an hour. Now, of course, all this is assuming that the player characters are traveling by foot or, driving themselves across town. And depending on your campaign, maybe they can take a train or a flying car. And there should still be some sort of possible events that they might, have or witness. But it's not as them taking, the streets and passing through every district along the way as it would be them taking some means of bypassing several districts altogether. Also, be sure that you sprinkle in any landmarks, such as, took a left at this huge monument. Don't feel the need to list every single landmark that they pass every single time they leave their home, but mentioning those every time they go out. Just mentioning one, something that they saw or something that they encountered really keeps that flavor of the city and what's inside of it and makes them feel like they belong to this larger place. Finally, let's discuss the passage of time. A city is a living thing, and living things evolve and change, and so should your city. If the campaign is taking place over the course of several months, it's probably not going to be that much that's going to be changing here. But over the course of years, the city shouldn't look the same at the end as it did at the beginning. One thing that I always found cool with the old Lankmar map is there are these blank sections here. Now, these were meant to be intended to be filled with geomorphs, the idea being that a living city, the map would constantly be changing as portions maybe burned down or were renovated, and the game master could easily swap out which geomorph filled each square, and you could rotate the geomorphs around to each direction they could face, and it was really, really cool. I love the concept, but the cost of it is that you have this really weird city map with a bunch of missing squares in it. In today's world with virtual tabletops, it would be a lot easier for a game master to quickly and easily, swap out and rotate different geomorphs on the map to make it look like the map is always changing, but doesn't always just have these big empty squares on it. But I've always liked the idea of this type of shifting map, where the city changes, not just because the players, burn down 2 blocks trying to kill a spider one day, but sometimes just a fire just happens to take out a few blocks because it's a city and fires happen in cities. When we did our Gutterpunk Kids campaign, that took place over the course of 6 years, the characters aging from 12 to 18 once it was done, as their once thriving neighborhood descended into the combat zone. Now, one big part of that campaign were street gang territories, so every time we advanced the clock to the next year, we'd update the map with the new territories as some gangs grew, other gangs shrank, new ones popped up while others died out. We also rolled for every NPC that was in the campaign. All of them. They all had a chance, say it was maybe 1 in 10, that something bad happened to them. Maybe they were killed or they were arrested or they simply moved away. And we did the same thing for all the businesses in that neighborhood. In fact, I made my players roll this roll every time we did it. That way, if their favorite noodle shop got closed down or their favorite NPC died, I could say that they're the ones that did that and not me. Yeah, it didn't stop us from blaming you, though. Now, of course, that is an extreme situation that was meant to reflect the dystopian fall of a neighborhood. I would never recommend that you decimate your NPCs and business locations every single 12 months in a normal urban campaign, but it really did demonstrate to us the power of a living city, or a dying city in that case. So Game Masters, I do encourage you to have things change around the city. Gang territories are very easy for you to do, but businesses should also be changing as well. Successful businesses, they might be moving off to larger buildings and more elite neighborhoods, while other ones, they might be downgrading to smaller buildings or moving to less elite neighborhoods. New businesses, they're going to be opening up all the time. Or the leader of one of the factions in town, they might die, and now the player characters have to completely reestablish their relationship with this new faction because it's under new leadership. Okay, that is pretty much it for this video. Cities, of course, can have far more social interactions than non-urban settings. So if you have any questions on handling social encounters and the effects of reputation, I have a dedicated video on that subject and you should check that one out. In the next couple of months, I hope to have our current Traveler's Secrets of the Ancients campaign all wrapped up. We're 17 months in, so I'm hoping to finish that one up soon. And while I'm on it, you should totally check out my campaign diary series that I'm doing on Secrets of the Ancients. It's got a lot of fun and a lot of me wearing silly costumes. But once we're done finished playing that, I plan to do a couple sessions of Blade Runner as a palate cleanse, hunting replicants through 2030's Los Angeles before we finally dive into Cthulhu by Gaslight, which I have been looking forward to that setting for a very long time, which I'm going to be employing much of the advice from this video into 1890s London. So urban campaigns have really been on my mind a lot lately, and hopefully some game masters out there, found this video helpful and can use some of the stuff in here when they're gearing up for their own city campaign. Anyway, a huge thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. Again, you can check them out at the link below if you want a 60% discount. Till next time, gamers, have a great day.